So I'd like to share an idea with you today. It's really one idea. And we're going to see it come up in a whole range of places. Obviously, the star of the show will be Purim. We have to talk about Purim. Next week, we won't have a Shiur because it will be the Purim Seudah. Everyone's going to be starting their Purim Seudah Thursday evening, right? Thursday afternoon. This will be a big Purim. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Purim Seudah. So I want to start off with just throw out a whole bunch of questions. And hopefully we'll be able to piece something together. We'll start off, hopefully we'll be a bit confused. And then we'll piece it all together. Okay. So I want to introduce you to a part at the end of the book of Shmuel. And a very interesting, peculiar story takes place. You have David HaMelech, who's the king, and he wants to count the people. He wants to count the people. That's the source number one. He wants to count the people. And his advisor, Yoav, says, you can't do that. You're not allowed to count the people. And David says, count the people. He says, you're not allowed to do that. Back and forth until, okay, so the king wants, I'll do it. So he counts the people, and then the prophet Gad comes to David HaMelech and says, you did the wrong thing. Now, I don't understand. I haven't looked into it, but I don't know exactly why David insisted on counting. But nevertheless, he did it, and the prophet comes and says, you've done bad, and God's about to punish you. And here's one of the strangest punishments you'll ever find in Tanakh. He's given a choice. It's like that play school. You have 3 windows. You get to pick which window you want. So here, David HaMelech gets 3 choices. Would you like window number 1? You'll get a war. There'll be an invading army. It will slaughter people. Window number 2, famine. Famine, hunger, and will kill a whole lot of people. Or would you like window number 3? Window number 3 is plague. There'll be disease, and it will kill a whole lot of people. What would you like, David? So now, if you just think to yourself what you would pick and why. Okay, you're the king of Israel, a frum bloke, you know what I mean? And so what would you pick? Anyone want to posit a guess before we jump on? We'll come back to it at the end, what he picked. Anyone want to?
Probably war, it's more fun.
More fun? Okay. More fun, okay.
Did you get plunder and loot and everything like that?
Okay, but just to understand, the prophet says there's going to be casualties, meaning you're going to lose. You're going to lose big time. Yeah, like all of these three, you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer either through war, you'll suffer either through famine, or you'll suffer through plague. So which one does he pick?
What was the first one?
War, famine, plague. War, you like war? Okay. A lot of warmongers in the crowd. Okay, fine.
He would have liked war.
Famine is good.
Famine is good. Famine is famine. Okay, fine. Let's go on.
You can plan for famine.
You just lose weight.
You can plan for famine. Okay. Okay, let's go on. My next question, this is all going to be pretty random questions all around the place, and we'll piece it all together. The next one, which is a bit of a dangerous question, because you better have a good answer to answer this, because I think that the question is very powerful. A lot of us in the room, at least some point in our day, hopefully in at least the week, we're at shul and we're davening, we're at home, we're opening up our siddur and we're praying. We open up the Shemona Esrei and we say, Refa'enu Hashem v'nerafeh. Heal us, Hashem will be healed. We say, Barech aleinu Hashem l'keinu. Bring us blessing, bring us prosperity. Are people who pray, let's just keep it really specific for now, are Jews who pray are they healthier than the average person?
No.
Are they wealthier than the average person?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Okay. So then the next logical question is,
Then why?
so what are we doing? What is it really?
You're educating yourself.
Can I tell you something?
You can tell me
Life
anything.
expectancy in Bnei Brak is the highest in Israel.
Okay.
What does it tell you? They are healthier.
They also daven in Mea Shearim.
Mea Shearim is
Okay. So I'm just throwing it out there. It's a scary question because it's like, oh, I've got to really address what is tefillah. But okay.
It's giving you a sense of, you know that everything is not in your hands, so you're asking somebody to help you, to be there for you, and you need that help. So you're standing back and you're recognizing there's somebody higher who can make a decision.
2 questions. Has God ever answered your prayers?
If I want to believe he has, then yes, he has. If I want to believe he hasn't, then he hasn't. It's how I want to perceive.
Does prayer always work?
Not in all instances. Sometimes we don't
So we'll leave it there.
for us.
So we'll leave it there. I'm going to leave it there. Okay? We'll leave it there. Does prayer always work? Not always. Sometimes God answers me, sometimes he doesn't. That in itself, okay, we could spend a lot of time. Those answers already are painting a certain philosophy of what prayer is meant to achieve. That's really the question. What's the objective of it? Okay. We'll come back. Maybe we'll just start opening up all these questions today. Next question. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, next question. So you have 2 individuals, interesting individuals, Avram and Sarai, who are unable to have children. They can't conceive. And then like you have a bit of a black box, right? And then you end up with them being the father of the Jewish nation and other nations. They're let's say, the biological parents of a lot of people and the spiritual heirs of the Jewish people. So what happened? How did a couple that were 100 years old, okay, manage to be the recipient of a child? If it shouldn't have been. According to all calculations, it shouldn't have been. What made Abraham special and Sarai special? Abraham and Sarai, what made them special to be able to change all that about?
What they did to the angels, or how they welcomed the angels. They were
A lot of kind people, a lot of people who did a lot of chesed, you know.
Abraham was the first one that believed in one God.
And Noah, who built the ark, he didn't believe in one God?
But I think Abraham
Abraham was the first guy who got it.
because
He understood what it meant that there was only one God. He understood what we were meant to
You had a
strive for in life.
You had the yeshiva of Shem and Ever.
They didn't get
That
it.
Yaakov, what's that?
Abraham was the first guy to get it.
Okay, I think that's a loaded word, the get it part. Okay. But certainly Noah, we believe he's an ish tzaddik b'dorotav, right? He was a righteous man in his generation. That's God testifying that he was a righteous man. Like he doesn't do that about everyone.
Was he righteous?
Yeah, all the back and forth, whatever it is, you know, like God doesn't give everyone the title of tzaddik. You know what I mean? So it's a bigger claim. So what's the novelty about Abraham? Okay, just throwing out the questions, throwing them out. Hopefully we'll be able to wrap it all up. The next one I'm going to bring from the Megillah. Now, the Megillah is great, you know. It's like a thriller. You know, I'm not sure about you when you watch a movie. Like you watch a movie that you've already seen, and you just like kind of almost hope that the ending will be a bit different, or you know, I don't know why. There was one like Groundhog Day. I remember, like I just kept thinking like maybe it'll be different this time. I'll watch it. Anyway, so you read the Megillah, and it's a real thriller, and it starts off spiraling downwards. Correct? That's how it starts off. You have Achashverosh, who is no friend of the Jewish people, who is in power. You have this Haman fella who gets second in command. And what's worse is that he convinces Achashverosh to be able to just ignore the advisors that he has around him and just make decisions by himself. When he kills Vashti, you know, things just spiral out of control. You know, a nice Jewish girl gets stuck in a palace. Trust me, Esther did not want to be there. You know, I was just reading today the selection process, I think, went on for 6 months, and there were 1,400 girls that went through the palace. And so it wouldn't have been a pleasure to be there. You know, probably went to the base Yaakov system, probably learnt about these types of men to stay away from, like, whatever. So here she is in the palace. And it's terrible. You have this crazy Jew, fanatical Mordechai, who won't bow down when he probably halachically could have bowed down. And you know, you can imagine the Jewish news. We do not associate with the practices of this one Jew. You know, he doesn't represent us. You know, from the Board of Deputies, something like that. And then lo and behold, Haman makes this terrible decree. The Jews, we told you so, Mordechai. You jeopardize the whole Jewish community now. So everything's really bad. Everything's really bad. And then everything gets really good. Esther becomes that little spy there, what do you call it, like that ticking, agent, the agent in the palace that works for good, and the fact that Ahasuerus had all the power allowed him just to kill Haman at a whim. Normally he would have to go through some sort of advisory process. In fact, the Malbim, he takes through, I think I've only done the first chapter of the Megillah. He goes through every sentence of the Megillah and explains how every sentence contributes to the miracle of how everything had to fit into place. Not just the main key events that we all know, but every sentence, which is quite phenomenal. It's a masterpiece. So what's that central point? Yeah, you've got the whole thing spiraling downwards, everything's terrible, and then, boom, everything starts going.
One individual can take a tough stand and contradict the whole world around them and change the view and the vision that was acceptable by everyone.
I'm talking about the Megillah. Where in the Megillah, in the whole, from A to Z, at what point does everything flip? Right? When does everything turn on its head? Right? We see it all going down, and then at some point it goes up. So we need.
When Esther narrates to the king that this is what is about to happen, he started finding out. Now tell me more.
Well, when she reveals who she is. Okay, so I'm going to suggest another part of the Megillah, and I think we'll see how that's a fundamental part of the Megillah, and everything just turns on its head. Okay. So maybe let's start with, what's that?
I was saying, I think a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
A bit earlier than that incident.
Yeah.
When do you want to suggest?
When Esther takes the responsibility to go and speak to the king.
Right, when she says, right, so that conversation between Mordechai and Esther, and now's the time, don't be silent, if you're silent, this will happen.
She says fast for 3 days and all that.
Right.
So at that point, when that's the night.
Right. So that's the point. So I think we have to look at that conversation and see what happened then, because that's when it flipped. Everything flips. So I'm going to start off with a story that I heard from my Rav in Israel, Rav Leuchter. He was a student of Rav Rabbi. You may know the book Shiur. So he was with this Rav for, I think he said, 25, 35 years. And he related a very interesting story. So my Rav Leuchter, went to his rabbi's house for Sukkot. Now what was interesting then is that around the table was his rabbi's, Rav Wolbe's wife. And they had other guests over. So it wasn't always that he gets to interact with the Rebbitzin, right? And he overheard the following conversation taking place between his rabbi's wife, Rebbitzin Wolbe, and another lady. So the other lady, she grew up in a place called Bialik, okay, which the way he describes was the height of secularism and was just swept by the Enlightenment. And the Rebbitzin grew up in I don't know, some, like, I can't remember exactly, somewhere close, somewhere nearby, but in a very, very religious area, okay? And they both were sent to Auschwitz. Okay, they both spent their war years through Auschwitz. And the Rebbitzin said to her friend, "Do you remember all the miracles that God performed for us in Auschwitz?" To which the other lady from Bialystok, she says, "What are you talking about?" She says, "I'll tell you." She says, "You remember, for all the years that we were there, we had to always work. Where we were working together, she said, our nails never grew and our hair never grew, and it didn't get in the way of our work. And would it have got in the way of our work, it would have inhibited our work, and we would have been sent away. Which is a miracle. To which the other lady replied, it's malnutrition. Okay, that's the story. So what happened then? What transpired there?
Looking for a positive in spite of.
Is one of them wrong? Do they contradict each other?
Perceive something. It's how you feel. It's the inner feeling of the individual. So one person felt, look, we were lucky, we could work, we were just okay with being able to work. We were just happy with their lot. The other one only saw the negative.
I'm not sure if malnutrition is negative. I wouldn't be able to fault her that she's a negative individual. I wouldn't feel comfortable saying, "Oh, you're so negative."
No, it's what she's experienced.
Right.
A friend of mine who used to study at the yeshiva said that God does miracles through nature.
Right.
Like you don't always think, it's not always like a bolt of lightning, whatever. It's through nature.
Right.
So this sort of fits that, doesn't it?
I have
to recognize you can have it. The choice really is if you see that Hashem is everything is happening through Hashem, through His will, everything happens. The fact that everything, nature is not something that exists outside of Hashem or separate to Hashem, or is something that Hashem put in place and has stepped away from to do its thing. So you can either recognize that everything that happens is Hashem's will that it happens, right, or you can feel that it's Hashem is not actually involved, or there's no God and these things happen by themselves. Right.
And to see, and with that in mind, it becomes clear that there's no contradiction. So it's not a contradiction between the two ladies. It's just two different perceptions. I saw this on the science door. This picture I'll show you. So what this picture is of a meadow, a nice meadow, and a sun, and trees, and birds, and a rabbit eating a carrot and some plants. And in the bottom, it's got all these formulas, right, for light, refraction of light, and carbon monoxide and dioxide coming out of the trees, and the sun, and all these things. And then it says, this is how a scientist sees the world. That's the caption. So I was thinking, how does a Jew see the world? The rabbit, okay, this little guy's not kosher. Does he have a ruminant stomach? Does he not have a ruminant stomach? The sun, there are certain brachas we make on the sun. If it was the moon, the birds, which birds are kosher, not trees, shade. You could give shelter to people. You can see now. There's no contradiction there. There's no contradiction. I go to a gym with a friend of mine in Moriah College. There's a nice little gym. So there's no one else there. It's very nice. And my friend, he's got a degree in design. Okay? So it's interesting. I've got another friend, actually. He's almost an international bodybuilder, a natural bodybuilder. Okay? So, when my friend, the designer, right, when I was going to the gym with him, he said the funniest thing. He says, they shouldn't have that machine over here. It doesn't go with the other machines. It really should be on the other side. Like the last thing in my head. And the other guy, if he would come, he's never come there. He's this international, bodybuilder, and he would look at the machine saying, okay, that's like low class. This is quality stuff, and he'd have a whole different guise. If you're an engineer, you'll see the building when you walk into a room. Whatever your specific trade is, whatever it is, you're sensitive to those details. It's not a contradiction. You're perceiving it in a different light. So the same thing here, that we're able to perceive a world with God. We're able to not perceive a world with God. If you remember when we did the Shiur on Shabbat. Okay, when we did the Shiur on Shabbat, and we talked about how God is creating an interface between us and Him. Okay, that was when we spoke about Shabbat, and we said He had to create that perfect interface to allow us, okay, not to be burnt by God's oneness. But the lens shouldn't be too thick either to totally obstruct godliness. So therefore the interface, which is what we said before, the universe, the whole world that we live in, has to be perfectly balanced. Perfectly balanced means that you can see God and you can choose not to see God. So no one should, it always irks me when someone says, it's so obvious, look in nature, you see God. Like no, it's not obvious. It can be obvious and it can not be obvious. It's not. Anyone who says it's obvious either way is lying to you. If someone says the world is obviously devoid of God, they're lying. If they say it's obviously full of God, they're lying. It has to be balanced. That's the rule. The rule is it has to be bechira, it has to be free will. Free will only exists when there's a pull either way. There always has to be a pull. At every stage, every stage, every miracle has to somehow be balanced in that sense. So where does that leave us? Where does that leave us, knowing that there are these two concurrent worlds? So I want to show you, if you just turn to the second page, there's an interesting part of the Megillah. So it talks here. Okay, I'll just do the English, but it seems contemptible in his eyes to lay hands on Mordechai alone, for they have made him known to Mordechai, therefore Haman sought to destroy. Okay, so this stage of the Megillah, Haman wants to destroy all the Jews, right? He's a bit upset with Mordechai, and he says, okay, I'm going to kill all you Jews throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordechai. Now, if you have a look on sentence 7, B'chodesh harishon hu chodesh Nisan, in the first month, which is the month of Nisan, Bishnat 12 Melech Achashverosh, in the 12th year of Achashverosh, Hipil Pur. Okay, you should recognize that word, Pur. Hipil Pur. He cast a Pur. He made a lottery. Hu HaGoral. What's that mean? Hu HaGoral.
That is your fate.
I thought Goral was...
So now, if you just look at the Hebrew, Hipil Pur, he made this lottery, right? He cast a lottery, Hu HaGoral, which is a Goral. Or you can look at it, which is your fate. This is telling us what he did, meaning he made a lottery, and then the Megillah is telling us, Hu HaGoral. A Goral is what? What's a Goral?
Fate, destiny.
A lottery is also like this, destiny, right? But the difference is Pur is the Persian word.
It's the same word, just two different languages.
It's the same word, just one's in the Persian, right, and one's in the Hebrew. In other words, it's like Mordechai, when he's writing this, he's telling you the following thing. What did Haman do? Hipil Pur. He made a Pur. And then you, because you don't know what this is, because the first time you've ever read the Megillah, you say, what's a Pur? And he says, Hu HaGoral. Oh, that's Hebrew. I know that. That means he made a lottery. Very good. You need to tell me what the word is, right? Lifnei Haman. So Haman made this lottery, which is a lottery in Hebrew, right? A goral in Hebrew. Good. So we could suggest that the reason it says Hipul Pur Hu Goral is to tell us what the word Pur means. Correct? There's only one problem with that. Look at the next source. Source 3 is now from chapter 9. The one that we just saw was from chapter 3. Chapter 9, it tells us, Ki Haman ben Hamarata Agagi, Sorekol Yehudim. Okay, the enemy of the Jews, Chashav ala Yehudim la'abdam. He devised, he thought out a plan to destroy them. Vehipil Pur, and he cast a Pur, Hu Agoral, Lahimam ula'avdam. It tells us again, which is a problem, because if you've already defined your words in chapter 3, you don't need to do it again in chapter 9. So I heard from Rabbi Leff, who explained this to us once. He said, it must be that it's more than just a definition. It must be that it is telling us something about...
Appeal is he broke away that thing. Is it...
I think from the word nofel.
From nofel.
Hinpil.
He dropped it. He discarded the idea. He discarded the idea. So first it was a concept, and maybe it was later a concept to be discarded.
Well, he himself he's doing this. He's making this lot. Right? The fact that it's repeated twice is telling us that it has to be more than just a definition. Okay? And Rabbi Leff wants to suggest that this is telling us, like what you suggested originally, Hippel Pur, Hua Garal. This will be your fate. That we'll leave it to chance. Okay? He never made a lottery to see if he should kill the Jews, right? He rather used the nature, he used the system to determine a date. Okay? This is the philosophy of Haman. It's a philosophy. The philosophy of Haman recognizes that there's a system. He recognizes that there is a system that the world is run, and a system of nature, teva. But that is blind. It's blind. And I'll use it to destroy you. Okay? That's why he's casting these lots. Okay. So we've seen here like this. There are these two ways of perceiving the world. We had the story with the Rebinson and her friend that she went through Auschwitz, and we saw that you can look at the same event through two lenses. Haman, his lens is just looking at that cause and effect. A goral. A goral is a lottery. It will just happen by chance. However it happens. There's nothing behind it. There's nothing guiding it. It will just happen. That's why the Megillah is saying it twice. Because it's not just a definition. It's telling us the philosophy of Haman. And therefore it's important to tell us again. Okay? I want to see from the Torah where you see very clearly these two worlds, these two ways of looking at something are articulated. Have a look at source 5. Source 5. V'item li kedoshim is from Parsha Kedoshim, the end of it. V'item li kedoshim, and you shall be holy to me. Why? Ki kadosh ani Hashem, because I'm holy. Ve'avdel etchem min ha'amim lihiyot li, and I've separated you from the nations to be mine. So here we have an injunction in the Torah to be kadosh. You have to be to me kadosh. Now look at the Rashi. The Rashi is I think its beauty is in its simplicity. The bottom of the page of page 2 says Rashi, Im atem muvdalim mehem. If you are separate from them, harei atem shali, then you belong to me. V'im lav, but if you don't separate from them, harei atem shel Nebuchadnezzar v'chaverav, then you'll be in the jurisdiction, so to speak, of Nebuchadnezzar, the one who destroyed the first temple, and his colleagues, he says, and his ilk. Okay, yeah. So the Torah says that very clearly. What's it mean to be kadosh? What's it mean to be kadosh to me? It means you have to make a choice between these two ways of living. If you're mine, if you want to live in my world, then you play by my rules. And I'll look after you. If not, your choice. But then just realize you're now subjugating yourself to Nebuchadnezzar and his friends. Which means there are two systems. There's my system, says God, and then there's the other system. I would say it's the natural, the system of cause and effect. Okay? When we are speaking about, again, to draw back from previous shiurim, that you have the concept of Hashem, this all-encompassing transcendental, and then you have the system of Elokim. Elokim is a system of Teva, right? It's also the gematria of Elokim and Hateva, the nature is the same. That Hashem runs the world. He has a system. That's the interface. That this Hashem has an interface which he runs and he conducts and runs the world through. Okay, and we perceive that as nature. We perceive that as Elokim. That's why the first chapter of Bereshit is all Elokim, 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 Elokim. There's no mention of Hashem, like Yud Kei Vav Kei. The first chapter of Bereshit is all Elokim. The whole creation is just Elokim, nature, a system, systems, nature. Only in chapter 2, when you get the introduction of man, do you have Hashem Elokim, Hashem Elokim, Hashem Elokim. It's always Hashem Elokim until the snake comes along. That's another topic. Which means the man has the ability to connect to the source. And the Torah says, do you want to be Kadosh? So you have to stick with me. That's Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei. You come to me. You live in my world, right? You live in my world, you play by my rules, I'll take care of you. Anything's possible. You're not bound by the system. Once you choose the system, once you choose to subjugate yourself by the system, so I'll let it play out. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah,
okay?
Because you've differentiated yourself.
You've differentiated yourself, but also when we choose Hashem, we differentiate ourselves. We can differentiate ourselves how we want. In fact, when it talks about the punishment, why the Jewish people why they were befitting a punishment of annihilation, there are two reasons given. One, they bowed down to the statue, the bust, I think it was, of Nebuchadnezzar. And the other one was because the people of Shushan, they attended the party of Achashverosh. Okay? When the Jewish people, just to get into this mindset, we're used to not being a power nation with the Beit HaMikdash and all these things, right? But if you just get into this mindset, Egypt, 40 years, in Israel for 400 years, you build a Beit HaMikdash, let's call it 400 years, and boom, you're kicked out. First time you're kicked out. And you go to Babylon. This is the first exile. The only thing you're used to is God taking care of you, of being in the city of God. And now you're kicked out. That's it. You guys, you're finished. That's the first time the Jewish people get kicked out. And they're in this terrible dilemma. The terrible dilemma is God still taking care of us? Are we still like kind of bound to Him? Or now that we've been kicked out, is that it? And you have these powerful figures, Nebuchadnezzar. And that's why they bowed down, because they thought, now that we're kicked out of Israel, we have no Beit HaMikdash, we're kicked out. I guess that's it. So now, if God's not looking after us, we have to now subjugate ourselves to the powerful people like Nebuchadnezzar, and thus they bowed down. That's why they bowed down, because it was a choice that now we have to, come onto the powers that be. We have to do well in this world of cause and effect, because I think we're lost from the bigger picture of connecting straight to Hashem, because we've been kicked out of our holy land. And that's going to tie us into the pivotal point in the Megillah. Like you said, it was a conversation between Mordechai and Esther. Mordechai tells Esther, it's now time to reveal yourself. You have to do it. She's reluctant. I'm going to die. What's going to happen? A beautiful sentence in the Megillah. If you remain silent at this point, redemption will happen from somewhere else, and you and your family will just get the flick from history. Who knows if this is the very reason why you were chosen for this position? So Esther says, I'll do it. Fine. However, I need something from you. And then Esther makes a request. She says, you go and gather the Jewish people, and I want them to fast, and I want them to put sackcloth, and I want them she wants them to do their part. So now, I'm going to play out the conversation that now takes place between Mordechai carrying out this wish of Esther to the people. Mordechai says, I need to speak to you guys. You're that fanatic. Leave us alone. You got us into this problem. You're the one that got us into this mess with Haman. For a whole year, the signs were up in Persia, in Shushan. We're going to kill you. We're going to plunder you. We're going to everything. It says the Jews were petrified. They were scared to go into a shop. They would buy something from the shop, and the guy would say, your money's worthless. You're all going to be killed. They wouldn't have been happy with Mordechai. Mordechai is a prophet, though. Okay, this is the end of prophecy. Prophecy began when we got the Torah 1313 BC, and it's going to end with Purim, roughly 313 BCE. It's 1,000 years of prophecy. Mordechai is the last of the prophets, and they know that. And he says, let me tell you something, guys. You think that the reason we have this terrible decree looming over our heads is because I didn't bow down to Haman. Makes sense, right? Everyone's bowing down, not me. You have this crazy Haman guy threatening, this rabid anti-Semite. And you think it's because I didn't bow down that all this decree happened. This whole decree happened. He says it's not. He says, because 9 years ago, that's the span of the Megillah, 9 years ago, you attended the party of Achashverosh. That's why. Okay? And the history behind that party, which in itself is a beautiful thing to find out. Why did Achashverosh make the party? You know, you think he's just a king having a fun time. Once you find out about this party, you'll understand what the problem was. It's because there was a prophet called Daniel. And Daniel prophesied that the exile will last for 70 years. Okay? 70 years. In other words, he said, you Jews, there will be an exile. This first temple will not be lasting forever. It will be destroyed and you'll be kicked out. But don't worry, it will be short-lived. It will be only 70 years. Now, the only problem with his prophecy was no one knew when it would start from. And a few people posited a guess. Yeah, they took a stab at when they thought his prophecy would end. Now, the prophecy was that after 70 years they would return back to Israel. So there was a guy, I think his name was, I'm not sure if you can get it, Shalmaneser or something, Shalmaneser. I think that's it. Shalmaneser, okay. He made his calculation, and he worked out, 7 years is up. The Jews are still here in Babylon. Yay! He goes to the vault, and he pulls out the vessels and the garments that they had stolen, that Nebuchadnezzar had stolen from the first temple. They wouldn't have dared touch it. They wouldn't have dared touch it until that point. But once he worked out that the Jewish people were kaput, the 70 years is up, that God didn't save them, so they're finished. So he felt he could now touch it. The second he did that, the Persians invaded, took over. Now that's Persian history. Babylonians were finished. So now you have Achashverosh. He also makes a calculation. And he calculated the 7 years was up. And he throws a party to celebrate the downfall of the Jewish people. That's the party. That's how we start the Megillah.
Even wear the teeth.
Right. It says he brought out all the clothes of the Kohen Gadol in Jerusalem. Why? Because you guys have finished. Your 7 years is up. Your God has deserted you. He's abandoned you. He's asleep. Haman said, their God is old. He's tired. So the Jewish people had a choice. Is it because of cause and effect? Politics. The reason we have this is just politics, Mordechai got on the bad side of Haman. Or is it because of our faulty actions that we did all the way back then? That was their choice. What world do you live in? What world do you live in? Mordechai said to them, what world do you guys live in? You want to live in a world of cause and effect? So you're going to be to the peril of Haman. You have to then work within the system. You have to try and fish yourself out of that because that's all you've got, just systems and cause and effect and nature. And you're bound by that. Or do you realize that really there's a world of Hashem, a world where there's a God who still loves you, He still cares for you, even in exile, even in Persia, even in modern day Persia. Yeah. That was their pivotal choice. And what do? Sakve Eifer. They put on the sackcloth. They fasted and they cried and they did teshuvah. They made that choice. The second they made that choice, Hashem says, "Great, you live in my world. Anything's possible. I'll flip the whole thing around. V'nahafachu. Everything can flip in a second. As long as you live in the system, so what the doctor says, that's what it is. That's it. He says, "There's no hope. There's no hope. Nothing we can do." If you live in the world of God, you live in His world, so a cure can just pop out of there. Something can be flipped around. The mechanism that you thought was for bad actually can work out for good. It's all possible once you decide to live in that world. Then you're not bound by the system. You're not bound by Elokim, the world of Elokim. You're bound now. You're bound by Hashem, and anything's possible.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How can you not drink for 3 days and nights?
I'm not sure. It would have been very difficult.
They were tougher. Not used to luxuries like we are.
Or drinking water.
So perhaps we can understand that as our question for tefillah. If tefillah is about getting what you want, which is what people normally think. Tefillah, I want something, God, can I have it? It's like an address to a very powerful person. Yeah? If that's what it is, so then sometimes you're answered, sometimes you're not answered, and it's kind of it's like a trying to twist God's hand into giving you stuff, you know? And then when I ask the question, does tefillah work? You'll hear sometimes yes, sometimes no. However, if tefillah is living in God's world, it's me being meshabed myself, me submitting myself, falling into Hashem's world. So then tefillah always works. Why? Because I'm asking Him. It's not about getting something, it's about the requesting. The fact that, when you need money, I don't go to my next door neighbor's parents, I go to my parents. Why? Because that's where it's going to come from. Okay, yeah, my parents. Yeah. I can. because you connect. That's what you're connecting. That's where you're connecting. Tefillah is the process of connecting. Hashem, I know that you're in charge of healing. I know. Because the praise is with you. When I heal, I want to connect with you, because when I get better, I'm going to praise you. And I know that the success lies with you. You're that's the only place where success lies, with you. You're the source of it. We spoke about the word baruch being like a brecha, that everything's flowing from there. It all flows from you. So whether I get it or not is actually inconsequential. It's the fact that in my process of tefillah, I'm now connecting with Hashem. So tefillah always works. Tefillah always works.
Because you get what you need.
No,
what you want.
Not because I get what I need. Because I'm connecting with Hashem. I'm connecting with Hashem. If you think about it, the whole thing of tefillah is quite. There's a huge paradox. Something like let's say something bad is happening to me now. Oh, that's so bad. I need to pray to Hashem. So hang on, if God's all good, okay, and He wants your best and He loves you the most, so a good God wouldn't do that to you. So, and I'm asking God, change it, because you don't know how to run the world properly. You're not giving me enough money. Surely you know that I need more, or more health. It doesn't work, right? Because if God's all good, He's giving you what you need. So why even pray? What do you want? What do you want to change? You want to change God's ultimate goodness for you? No, you don't. So you get stuck. It's like this terrible paradox of tefillah. From God's perspective, everything's going really well, So there must be some different outcome that I'm trying to elicit from tefillah, which is me connecting to God's world. That I can do that now. That's a process. I can think about it. I can contemplate. Healing. I'm going to a doctor. So what part does the doctor play? He's part of the system. Hashem's healing will go through the doctor. Of course, I've got to choose a good doctor, but the healing will go through the doctor. Will go through the Panadol. I'm not going to bow down to the Panadol. I understand that Hashem infused this ingredient in His nature with healing powers. It's a different way of looking at it. And the more I can associate myself with God's world, the more Hashem can have an input into my life. And it's purely based on perception. Now, I'm not into, I don't know enough, but I'm sure if someone who knows quantum physics, it lines up very nicely with the fact that how one perceives it, it actually affects the reality. As far as I know, it really works very nicely with that type of quantum physics. So what does David HaMelech choose? What does David HaMelech choose? He does not choose war. You know why? In a war, who do you want to be around? What's that? Soldiers. Why soldiers? Protection. You want to be around strong people, right? You put your hope in the soldiers. Don't worry, the soldiers are there. They're protecting us, correct? In a time of famine, when bread is scarce, who gets the bread? The rich. You put your hope in wealth, in money, because the people who have the money will be able to get the food that's still available, the import something. The poor people, nothing, you can't do anything. Okay? Plague. What about when there's a disease running around the place? Where do you run?
No discrimination.
Is the doctors any better off? No, it's a plague.
David's equality.
What's that?
It's more equal.
Yeah, it's beautiful equality, right? You see a beautiful equality there. Have a look. Look at source number 7, and you'll recognize this from tefillah. When you see this, your tefillah will be totally different. I'm telling you. Listen to what David said. Vayomer David el Gad. David said to God, the prophet, Sar limod. It pains me. I guess he's saying, I messed up, and it pains me that I even have to choose. But now that I have to choose, Nipla na biyad Hashem. Let me fall into the hands of Hashem. Why? Ki rabim rachamav. Because then at least I can apply for mercy. If I live in Hashem's world, there's still a chance. Because if you live in Hashem's world, anything's possible. If I subjugate myself to war and famine, where people are going to now... So if I choose those two, and people are going to run after the rich, and they're going to run after the strong. So people won't think about God. They're going to think about the rich and the strong. Then we've lost out. Because then whatever nature dictates, nature will dictate, and thus will be the effect. But let me fall in your hands, Hashem, ki rabim rachamav, because with you there is mercy. Uveyad adam al epolah. Don't let me fall into the hands of man. And that we say straight after the Shemona Esrei every day. And then in Tachanun, and that next paragraph is all about asking for Hashem's mercy. It's a beautiful thing we can now think about in Tefillah. You're just throwing yourself into Hashem's hands, saying, I want to subjugate myself to your world where anything's possible. I want to connect to you. Okay? So it's a very emotional line from David. And you see there the same principles coming out. There are two worlds. And they're running concurrently. And we get to choose. And it's a real pella. What's a pella?
It's a miracle.
A miracle, a wonder that they can operate together. Yeah? Look at source number 6. We say this every morning, and after we go to the bathroom, we say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher yatzar et ha'adam b'chochma. You created man with wisdom, either that you gave man wisdom or you created him in a very wise fashion. Uvarav v'nekavim nekavim, holes, chalulim chalulim, cavities, galuv yadul v'nei chesed v'dech, and it's known before your heavenly throne. She'im yipatech echad mem u'yisatim echad mem. If you will open them or close them, if shal hitkaim v'la'amod v'nech, it will be impossible to survive before you. Baruch atah Hashem. Rofech basar, the healer of all flesh, umafli la'asot. Umafli la'asot, from the word pella. Not the soccer player, but this pella. Okay, umafli la'asot, and he does wonders. It's brought down by the commentators. What's this wonder that he does? What's the pella? The pella is, and we're here talking about this human being, correct? That's the focus of the bracha. The pella is that the human being is a composite of two things that do not go together. Guf and neshama, body and soul. And if you have a look throughout Tanakh, it's another shiur we can have. You look throughout Tanakh, whenever the word pella is used, it's always a combination of opposites. It's always a combination of opposites. An interesting thing to see there. But here, it's a pella that we can have a body and soul together. The angels, we'll call them pure soul. The animals, that's just pure body. And this unique creature on earth, right? This man, capital M, of course, is a composite of body and soul. And how they go together, it's a pillar. That's the pillar. That's the wonder. And just like man can have these two opposites operating at the same time inside of them, so to the world, that's what we're talking about now. The world also has. I can view the world in two different ways. I can look at it like the scientists. I can look at it in a whole different... I can look at a room in many different ways. You can look at the events in Auschwitz. These two ladies, they can look at it different ways. David HaMelech understood, I want to choose this world, because when I do that world, I'll be able to access Rachamim. And in Purim, I think that pivotal point is when the Jewish people recognized that's the world we want to subjugate ourselves to. maybe just to end off, I was just thinking that, again, so it's a few other ideas thrown in there. Okay, I'll end with this one. I was thinking like this. There's a very interesting mitzvah on Purim. The kids love talking about this one. Getting drunk, okay? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to look at you just then. It's very strange. We normally don't, we don't do that. We don't like getting drunk. If you look throughout Tanakh, Lot's drunk, Noah drunk. It's always got a bit of a bad tinge to it. Even the story in the Gemara where it talks about two rabbis getting drunk, it doesn't have such a positive outcome. One, how you understand it, but one ends up killing the other and having to revive him. It's not such a good Purim party there. So what is this? It's chayiv inish. A person is obligated, livasume. Okay, a bit of a strange word to use. We'll just say for all intents and purposes to get drunk. Ad de lo yada, to the extent that he doesn't know the difference, Bain Baruch Mordechai, between blessed is Mordechai and Arur Haman, and cursed is Haman. That's the chiyuv of the day right there, amongst the other ones. Why? How can we link it to what we spoke about? I need to give you something good to think about on Purim, when you're knocking down the wine. So, normally we have a very prized faculty called our seichel. Right? You give us a seichel to distinguish between good and bad, right? Lasech v'vina l'havchin ben yom ben laila, or Havdalah service, we say, Mavdil ben kodesh l'chol, ben or l'choshech, ben yisrael la'amim. What's our brain for? It's to be able to decipher between what's right and wrong. Perhaps we use our brain to I guess, operate in the system. God creates this interface, and we want to now interact with this interface and do what we can. Purim is unique in that that the system, which normally is devoid of any emotion, it's just a system, it's teva, it's nature, it just does what it does. If you want to get some sort of connection, emotional thing, you have to connect to Hashem, which is what we've been saying. But the novelty of Purim, and Haman was trying to use that teva against the Jews. And what's the outcome? That the nature worked for the Jews. The nature worked for the Jews. It was on our side. Not just that Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, was on our side, but the system itself played in our favor. All the stream of events were in our favor. Even nature was backing the Jews. That's very strange, right? So perhaps getting drunk on Purim, again, to what extent you have to ask, you look at Rabbi and find the sources. I'm not condoning any underage drinking, etc., etc. But that's what I have to say at school. So okay. But the notion of the drinking is that I'm blurring. You see, when a person gets drunk, what's going on? They're losing that essential faculty of distinguishing. Okay, they're saying, whatever. You're just throwing yourself into the grip of whatever's going on, right? You lose all sense of being able to control. I'm just throwing myself to the vestige of nature, if that's the expression, right? Why? Why on Purim? Because I'm saying that even Hashem is expressed all through the nature. It's not a separate thing. It's actually an expression of it. That's godliness as well. It's not just Hashem outside the system. Even the system is Hashem. And I recognize that on Purim. When else do we recognize that? When else do we say Hashem and Elokim? If Hashem is that thing that we've been speaking about outside the system, and Elokim is the whole system of nature, when else do we say that Hashem is actually Elokim? When do we scream that out? Ne'ilah. Yom Kippurim. The day like Purim. We're achieving the same thing on both days. On Purim, we do it, we're getting drunk. And we realize the system also is you, Hashem. I just throw myself. I'm going to throw away my sense of seichel, my sense of distinguishing. And Hashem, I know it's all you, and you'll take care of me. And we say the same thing at the end of fasting and wrapped in our talit at the end of Yom Kippur, and we can scream the same thing out. Hashem, hu ha'elokim. Hashem, hu elokim. Hashem, you are really this whole interface, this whole nature. It's really you. I know it's only you. And we achieve the same thing on Purim in a very different fashion. But it's coming out against Haman, who only saw the system as a separate unit from Hashem, and he wanted to use that system of nature against the Jews. So hopefully we can, next week there won't be a Shiur, but hopefully we can take this message and put it into our Purim. During the Purim day we should be thinking about Hashem, think about what the decision that the Jewish people made on Purim, which was, we want to be part of your world. The same thing that we're doing in the shuls on Yom Kippur, we're doing on Purim. It's a very holy day. It's a very special day. And we should use Purim for that, subjugating ourselves to Hashem's world. And hopefully when we do that, Hashem will give us all the brachas, all the things that we need, and the things that we want. Have a good Purim. Have a good Shabbos.